In theory, auto RPGs were created for people who work a lot but still want to play something, even if they don't have time to constantly level up or farm for items. And that's basically how the idle RPG genre came to be. So if you think every game in this style is bad, I'm going to show you some really interesting games that are definitely worth checking out if you enjoy this genre. I really like this game's story and the way it works. Let's talk about Seal of Fate.
Take my punch!
The story of Seal of Fate follows the Ginger Squad, a clumsy group of broke adventurers who set off on a chaotic journey to find the legendary and mythical Seal of Fate. The game has a lot of comedy and sometimes it feels like you're reading a manga because of the way the story is presented. Its RPG system is a little more traditional, so there isn't really that much to go deeper into. The game features different characters and some really beautiful cutscenes that genuinely make you feel more connected to the story. A slightly different concept for a game that also has a very popular anime. Let's talk about Slime Isekai Memories. Well, I've seen a little bit of the anime, but I'm not sure if everything that happens in the game also happens in the anime. The game has a more automatic combat system, which is basically a turn-based RPG where you'll usually fight different monsters along the way. However, the game has another feature that really stands out, and that's the city building system. You control the blue-haired character, and throughout the city you can give different commands and watch the society grow. It's actually pretty interesting. On top of that, of course, you have the entire story mode and several characters from the anime for you to collect. I'm honestly really impressed with this game, especially when it comes to the graphics. I think it's a very well made game. Let's talk about Stellar Traveler. I really like the story of this game, where you play as a character exploring several different planets, which is why everything has this cyberpunk aesthetic. The auto RPG system only applies to the battles. That's because throughout most of the game you actually control your characters as they move around the map, explore new areas, and of course defeat plenty of enemies. The characters in the game are interesting, but what impresses me the most is the visual style and the fact that you can actually control your character. The most questionable game on our list. I honestly don't even know if this game should be on the Play Store, but let's talk about TAIMANIN Squad. This is the turn-based RPG version of Action TAIMANIN, which is basically an action RPG that works in a similar way. In the game, you play as several female characters who have to stop an alien invasion. The game is said to be based on an anime that's quite controversial, and as you can see, a big part of the game is focused on collecting and customizing its female characters. Putting that aside, the game is actually very well made. Its turn-based RPG system, character progression, and battle mechanics are genuinely impressive. And despite that strong focus, the game manages to be surprisingly complete. This is one of the most crowded games on the Play Store, and the number of players this game has is honestly impressive. Let's talk about The Legend of Neverland. The game came out around 2022 alongside Genshin Impact, and it's true that it tried to copy a lot of that open world RPG formula, but nowadays it has developed quite a bit of its own identity. The game has around 8 to 9 classes that you can choose from, and it reminds me a lot of Ragnarok, especially because of its attribute system. On top of that, it does a really good job of delivering a fantasy world with a well-made anime style. But this is another game with a lot of automatic gameplay, from leveling up your character to even using your own abilities automatically. This is one of those games that gets released because of an anime that became extremely popular. Let's talk about KAIJUU number 8. Well, it's a little difficult for me to talk about this game because I haven't really watched the anime, I just know that it exists. However, after playing the game for a bit, I realized that you basically end up experiencing the anime anyway, since the game uses cutscenes from the anime and also includes a lot of its story. I'd say it's a somewhat generic turn-based RPG with plenty of autoplay. I really like the characters, and of course this game will be much more appealing if you're a fan of the anime and want to collect all your favorite characters. There's also an endless grind for upgrading your characters, along with plenty of online content. An extremely old game on our list, and probably one of the most famous when it comes to this genre. Let's talk about Raid Shadow Legends. I remember a lot of people used to call this game League of Legends as an RPG because its characters looked pretty similar and were very well designed. Besides its turn-based RPG gameplay where you actually have to play the battles, the game also has a city building system, so it's basically a strategy game that mixes turn-based RPG elements, and nowadays the game features more than 100 different characters. I remember that it wasn't this automated in the beginning, but it has adapted quite a bit over the years, and it's still active today with a large player base. Now, this is an extremely high quality MMORPG and a great choice if you're looking for something really complete while still having plenty of automatic gameplay. Let's talk about Raven 2. game has a story about the end of the world that's actually really impressive, with lots of cutscenes, monsters to defeat, and of course a world that you have to save. The story is definitely one of the main highlights, but of course the game goes far beyond that. It has an impressive open world with plenty of things to explore, along with around 10 completely different classes that you can use to customize your character. The game also focuses quite a bit on fan service, and it's basically the first MMORPG I've seen that puts this much focus on that style. But what really stands out is the game's graphics, which are extremely well done. This is definitely the most automatic game on our entire list, but for some reason it's incredibly addictive. Let's talk about Realms of Pixel. In this game, you basically just manage your characters and decide which ones you want to upgrade, because almost every aspect of the game is automated. From collecting items to upgrade your characters to even progressing through the story mode, everything can be done automatically. And one thing that really stands out about this game is how much it resembles Dragon Ball. If I'm not mistaken, it might even be from the same creator or something similar, and there are some characters that really look quite alike. I really like the pixel art style. I think it looks really beautiful, but this is a very automated game. It might honestly be the most automatic one on our entire list. This is one of those games that usually ends up flying under the radar for a lot of people. Let's talk about Reverse 1999.
Oh, my apologies. I'm so sorry.
You play as Vertin, the main character and the game's central perspective. She's not your typical time traveler. Time stopped moving after the year 1999, meaning the year 2000 never actually happened. What happened during 1999 is still a mystery, and the ultimate goal is to somehow return to that time. The game also has a very mysterious story, and a lot of people praise it because of that. But of course, the combat gameplay is also really interesting, mainly because of the card system. The cards give the game a completely different dynamic, and on top of that, the game also looks really good graphically. This could easily fit both on a list of underrated games and a list of great card games. Honestly, I think this is one of the best games on our list. I played it for quite a while. Let's talk about ETHERIA Restart.
轮到我了呀！哈，非常感谢。
I just realized that I don't actually know much about the game's story, because I basically skipped all the dialogue and just went straight into the gameplay. Now, the gameplay is an extremely well-made turn-based RPG, but of course it also has plenty of autoplay. The main way you actually play the game is through its story mode, where you control your character and have to defeat the villains that appear along the way. The game also has an endless grind and plenty of characters for you to add to your team. Unlike many other games on our list, this one puts a lot of focus on characters that are extremely beautiful and very well designed. It honestly makes you want to collect all of them. I honestly love the concept of this game and the way it works. Let's talk about figure fantasy. Now, in this game, you play as characters that are basically collectible figures, like action figures. In theory, your characters stay still whenever their owner is around, but once the owner leaves, they come to life and start fighting. The game already features more than 90 characters for you to collect, and some of them are really cool collabs with other anime series. However, this is another game on our list that works almost entirely through autoplay. There isn't really any manual gameplay besides upgrading your characters and positioning them properly on the battlefield. But of course, it's still worth giving this one a try. You know, I gotta say, I really loved this game. It works in a pretty interesting way. Let's talk about Genesis War. The first thing I want to point out is that this game is extremely large. Even though it might not look like it, it takes up more than 10 gigabytes of storage. The game works really well in its story mode, where you're basically in the middle of a war and have to decide which path you want to take. And yes, it does have some non-automatic gameplay, especially when you have to make important decisions or take down a giant boss. But of course, the game doesn't force you to do everything manually. When you just want to level up your character, you can use a more automatic system as well. Graphically, it looks really good, and it also has a tactical style of gameplay. I'd give this one a 10 out of 10. Definitely worth checking out. One of the heaviest games on our list, and honestly, I don't even know why. Let's talk about Girls Frontline 2. I have to mention that the game takes up around 35 gigabytes, which is honestly pretty impressive. It has a really well-made tactical RPG system, and honestly, in this case, I think the game would be even better without the autoplay. However, a big part of the grind and even a good portion of the story can be played using the auto mode to make progressing and leveling up your characters easier. And as the name suggests, you'll be playing with several female characters throughout the game. This is also another game that puts quite a lot of focus on fan service in different ways, if you know what I mean. Honestly, I think this game is pretty impressive. It must be really popular somewhere in the world. Let's talk about HIGAN, ERUTHYLL. This is another game I played quite a lot, but I didn't really pay much attention to the story. Basically, it's about a character who travels to another world and has to save it from some villains. The game actually has a pretty deep story with several cutscenes and lots of interesting characters. I just didn't pay much attention to it. I'd say this game is almost like a card game. The battles happen in a more automatic format, as you can see, but you have your characters' cards at the bottom of the screen, and each one gives them a completely different ability. And that's not all. You can also choose where they're going to attack when using their main abilities. It's a really interesting game with a very different concept. If there's one game that can be considered a reference for automatic RPGs, it's definitely this one. You need to know about it. Let's talk about Blue Archive Awak. This game became so popular in Asia that it even got its own anime. It was one of the first mobile games to receive an anime adaptation, and it's been active for a very long time, I'd say for more than 5 years, and they basically released new characters every week. The game has more than 150 characters for you to collect and build your team with, and of course there's also an almost endless amount of content for you to keep upgrading your characters as much as possible. However, it would be almost impossible to do all of that manually, and that's where the game's auto system comes in to help you a lot. I don't know if this is something recent or not, but the game has also been putting a lot of focus on fan service lately. I'd say this one goes pretty hard when it comes to autoplay because it basically has it in every aspect. Let's talk about Dragon Traveler. The game tells the story of a character who ends up in another world and is basically chosen to save it, but he doesn't exactly remember who he is. The game has a whole storyline that's actually pretty interesting to follow, but there's a lot of automation. I mean, the kind of autoplay where the game can even collect items for you while it's closed. The game already features more than 30 characters that you can add to your team, and all of them are female characters. That's because, as you can see, the game also focuses quite a lot on fan service, especially when it comes to outfits and some of the story scenes. We finally have a mobile version of Dynasty Warriors, and of course, to many people's surprise, the game has some autoplay features while still offering insane gameplay. The cool part is that the game didn't abandon its signature gameplay where you control a single character and have to defeat hundreds of enemies in front of you. The story mode and many other parts of the game still require you to play manually. However, a big part of the grind, especially when it comes to leveling up your character, can be done automatically. The game features several iconic characters from the series, along with maps that are heavily inspired by the classic game. So if you enjoy insane gameplay but don't have much time to spend leveling up your character, this is definitely a great game for you. Another game on our list that is definitely a reference when it comes to auto RPGs, and we're going to talk about it now. Let's talk about Epic 7. This one is honestly pretty crazy. The game has more than 250 characters for you to add to your team, and they all have their own unique characteristics and story. It's also worth mentioning that this is a pretty old game that has gone through several updates and some really cool collaborations with famous anime series. Now, when it comes to gameplay, there isn't really much to say. The game is almost completely automatic, and you basically just watch your characters battle while you focus on upgrading them and positioning them properly. If I'm not mistaken, this is actually one of the most downloaded games on our list. And this game has a pretty cool concept that manages to innovate quite a bit. Let's talk about a game called ERUTHYLL of SEPIA. It's a relatively casual game where you don't have to worry too much about leveling up your character or doing a lot of grind. However, like another game on our list, it doesn't really give you that many things to do manually, but as you can see, there's something really interesting about these characters. They're basically characters you already know, but transformed into female characters. Naruto, Goku, Ichigo, or basically that anime character you instantly recognize, but in a female version. That's something pretty different, and I'd even say it's pretty genius. Overall, it's a very well-made auto RPG. This is a game that has autoplay, but only during its combat gameplay. Let's talk about a game called Abyss Hunters. The goal of the game is to build the best team you possibly can. To do that, you'll add different characters to your team and see how they interact with each other. The game is almost like a dungeon crawler where you enter dungeons and defeat as many enemies as possible. However, inside the dungeon, you control your character normally, so there's nothing automatic about that part. It's only when you enter combat that you sit back and watch your characters battle. Surprisingly, it's both really interesting and very simple at the same time, and it can easily become addictive. One of the newest games on our list, and also one of the most successful, let's talk about AFK Journey. I think AFK games are basically the peak of the idle RPG genre. These games have almost everything automated and can sometimes feel like you're barely even playing. But this one is different. The game already features more than 50 characters for you to collect. I also really like its visual style, which leans much more toward a cartoon aesthetic. This is another game on our list that puts a big focus on its open world. It's one of the few times where you actually need to play quite a bit, both to explore the world and to progress through the story. As for the combat, character progression and grind, all of that works in a much more automatic way within the game. I gotta say, I actually ended up liking this game quite a bit, especially when it comes to the graphics, but it's also a pretty generic RPG. Let's talk about ALLFIRING. This is an action RPG with some automatic features, but you can still play quite a lot without feeling like the game is forcing you to wait around every day. Honestly, I really liked both the graphics and the battle system. The game already features more than 20 characters that you can collect through the gacha system, and the interesting part is the progression. You don't have to constantly level up your characters yourself. The auto mode takes care of that. While you focus on defeating bosses and playing some of the online content, there are also stages where you actually have to solve puzzles yourself to progress. So basically, this is a great balance between automatic and manual gameplay. A game with an impressive open world that still doesn't completely move away from automatic gameplay. Let's talk about Ares the Iron Vanguard. I really like the game's visual style. It reminds me a lot of anime, but with a slightly more realistic look as well. The story is also interesting as you're exploring a new planet where you have to defeat an alien race known as the Monsters. The game has a lot of autoplay features, but it still lets you play manually if you want to. The combat is pretty interesting, and the game has more than 6 classes for you to choose from, along with a massive open world for you to explore. On top of that, the game has a unique weapon system that can completely change the way you play your character. In theory, you might not think this game has an autoplay system, but it actually does. Let's talk about Ash of Echoes. That's because it basically works like a tower defense while also being a pretty good RPG. For example, the entire progression system for your character as well as the characters you collect throughout the game follows that classic RPG formula with an almost endless grind. The only difference is that instead of playing it like a traditional turn-based RPG, you have to defend a route just like in a proper tower defense game. The interesting part is that it works really well. Enemies can come from all directions and you have to choose abilities for your characters to attack them. And from what I've seen, the game is also pretty demanding and looks really good graphically. And that's it. These are some of the best auto RPGs you can find on mobile. If you enjoyed the list, leave a like and subscribe for more. See you in the next video.